Well, hello again. Welcome back to my YouTube page. I'm Tony, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install the M14.CA Blackfeather stock onto a standard M1A. Okay, and what we're going to be doing is removing the GI fiberglass stock and the handguard, and we're going to drop it into the chassis system. Now, something that when you order the stock, it comes with this is a operating rod guide installation tool. It's basically a pipe, and it slips over the barrel. We'll show you later on how that works. Other things that they include are a strip of sandpaper, just in case you need to reduce the size of the barrel around the operating rod guide so that it slips on and gets a good fit. Now, if it's too loose, you're going to have to knurl it, and again, we'll go over that if, in fact, I do have to do that. The other thing it comes with is a replacement roll pin, because you're going to be taking out the other one as well. And it also comes with some Loctite and some other associated hardware. Tools you're going to need to install the and this, by the way, is the Blackfeather operating rods guide, and this is pretty much the heart of the rifle right here. And something that I forgot to mention on my previous video is how this operating rod guide sits in the stock is adjustable by this screw right here on the bottom. And so it's an insert that takes a hex head screw, and you can back it out and adjust how this sits in the stock and angle up your stock while it's in the chassis, and you can optimize it for your accuracy. And so it's kind of accounts for variances in receiver differences and dimensions between maker to maker, as long as they're not too far out of spec. Okay, you're also going to need a 1/8 roll pin punch. Okay, and this is basically, it's a punch with a tip on it. If you're not very familiar with punches, when I say it's a tip, it's got a raised center, so it always centers on the roll pin as you're hammering, and so it's not going to drift off to one side as you hammer it on. Okay, and something you're probably going to need is either a set of cutters or a set of pliers to get your old connector pin roll pin out, and we're going to have to shave that as well. Now, if you have to shave it, you can there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either shave it while it's in the receiver, or you can take it out of the receiver and cut it down to fit. Okay, and we'll go over that later. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is remove the action from the stock. Now you want to completely disassemble your barreled action. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take out this roll pin. Get your 1/8 roll pin punch and your hammer. And sometimes it may get stuck, and in my case it looks like mine got a little bit stuck there, so I'll just have to get it out somehow. Okay, so what I've done now is I put my receiver in a padded vise, and I went ahead and got the roll pin out. It was a little bit of a booger bear. I did not put this rifle together. Apparently the roll pin was somewhat bent, so my punch went in at a little bit of a funny angle. So I actually had to put the punch in a vise, and I had to use a pry bar to get the roll pin out. And hopefully you don't have as much trouble as I did trying to get this off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to break the tension on this operating rod guide, and I'm going to get a wrench. I'm going to put it around here. I'm going to try to spin it and try to work it off. Now if yours already fits loose, then you're already ahead of the game. It's just going to come right off. Alright, so what I've gone ahead and done is I've put a wrench around this, and I'm going to try to somehow get this to budge, and it may be kind of difficult. My receiver's kind of moving around. I don't want her to wrench too hard on my receiver. And it doesn't look like it wants to move. Okay, so it looks like this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to get off. So I'm going to have to hammer on this and try to get it off, and I might even have to apply some heat. So obviously you want to protect your crown, okay? So always make sure that you're on some wood, and I know this is a wood surface, but I'm also trying to protect my tabletop as well from getting too badly mangled, okay? So I'm using the brass side of a hammer. I'd like to try to save this operating rod guide if possible, but hey, you know, if I get destroyed, or if this gets destroyed, then they're not that expensive. They're maybe $15 for a new one. So it appears to be moving. I'm looking through the hole here, and I can see that the slot on my barrel isn't exactly lined up anymore, so it is moving. So hopefully just a few more whacks with the hammer, and this thing will come off. And as you can see, I've already got some progress going on there. Now just a little bit farther to go, and it appears that this barrel has been knurled, so I can finally see some knurl marks, which is why this is such a booger to get off. And obviously you want to be careful. I've already got some brass marks, but hey, it's brass on steel, so that should be able to scrub right off. Alright. So as you can see, this is my gun, and I got some brass marks here, but nothing obviously that's going to damage this barrel permanently, just because of the fact that it is brass on steel, and you should be okay. Okay, so your next step is going to be getting this roll pin out, and I traditionally just use a set of cutters. These might be a little big, or you can probably get it with some needle nose, but either way you have to get this connector pin out because it has to fit flush against the side here. And you can either make a witness mark and say, okay, I'm going to trim my connector pin, or what you can do is you can make a mark, move the connector pin out just a little bit, and then from where that mark is you can get a Dremel and you can cut it in place, but you have to be very, very careful. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something else. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and you'll see what I'm going to do later. So the first thing is to get this pin out, and again, this is if you don't want to cut the pin in place. And sometimes this can be a little bit tough. Okay, so that pin's out. And now I can just pull this pin out, and there it is. So if you want to cut this pin flush while it's sitting outside the receiver and you just want to measure the hole, we'll go ahead and measure it. So from the end of the slot where the pin references off of to the edge of the receiver appears to be 7.702 inches, or if we want we can change this to millimeters, 17.84 millimeters. So what I've done before is I've shaved this end because I don't really need that roll pin. I can just get a stick. If I really need to get it out, I can just get a stick and push it out that way. I mean, it really is up to you. If you want to shave it and then stick the roll pin back in and be able to use that roll pin to disengage your connector, it's really up to you. It's personal preference. But me, I personally choose to get the solid side and put it in. Okay? And then I just get some kind of a stick, and better I just turn the receiver on its side and let it fall out. In a field environment, that may not be ideal. Now, if you're lucky like me, I happen to find a pin that was already cut to that size, and it's stainless steel. If you want to, you can measure the thickness. This is 0.198 inches, or 5 millimeters. Okay, 0.504 millimeters is what I've got there, and this just happens to be a 5 millimeter pin. Okay, and this one happens to be 17 millimeters long. Okay, or 0.699 inches. So it's very, very close to the length that I need to be, and it fits right in there, and it's nearly flush with the side of the receiver. So good luck for me. I don't have to do any Dremel cutting or anything like that. So next order of business is trial fitting your operating rod guide. Okay, now this obviously is not going to go on, so now I have to get the supplied sandpaper, and I've got to use that to reduce the size of that. So I've got my receiver in a vise, padded of course, and I'm just going to get the sandpaper and work it around this raised area and see how much I can get off here. Obviously you want to be careful not to take the parkerizing off anything but the section of the operating rod guide area, which is probably going to be a little difficult. Now if you want, which is what I should probably do, which is what I think I'm going to do, is I'm going to go ahead and tape up my barrel. Now there may be a better way to do this, especially if you have a lathe, but that requires taking the barrel off, so a lot of us probably aren't going to want to do that. So we're just going to have to go slow. So I'm going to do something. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here. So I've got this operating rod guide that's old, and I can just use it to try to flatten out those spots. Okay, so I got my old operating rod guide on. Just hammering it on a little bit. I'm going to get this wrench, and I'm going to try to get this, to get these knurled edges loosened up a bit. Okay. You see how I'm flattening that on. Now we'll test this. As you can see there, I'm having some luck flattening out that knurling. As you can see, I'm kind of making some progress here, and I'm able to get it on a little bit farther every time. Okay, so what I've done now is, after repeated, I just basically slid this pipe over the barrel, and I just kept kind of using it as a slide hammer to hammer on the old operating rod guide and turn it, okay, with a wrench, with a crescent wrench, okay, and smoothing out that old knurling. So now I have a situation where now I have my old operating rod guide, and I can use a wrench to basically keep spinning it around the barrel. And it's not loose, okay, if I can turn it by hand, it would barely be by hand, but it's really snug. And this is how you want it to be. So now I can rotate this around and I can get it off. And we just go ahead and keep on rotating that and we get it off. And now we want to slide our old or our new operating rod guide on and trial fit it. I also want you to know that here it is. What I've done is I taped the crown, right, of the barrel, and I also taped over here where the gas cylinder, the barrel shoulder, basically what they call this, where the gas cylinder meets. And as I slide this aluminum pipe on, I really don't have any aluminum to steel contact, and I've just been using this as a slide hammer to go ahead and flatten out those knurling marks. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and done is I've slid the Blackfeather operating rod guide around over the front of the barrel, and it's still pretty snug. I'm going to try to give it a couple of taps with a hammer, and always make sure, in fact it might even be a good idea just to remove these screws entirely for this part of the process. So make sure these 3 screws are backed out and removed. And we can put those on later. This appears to be really tight, so it looks like we might have to still work on this. Operating this section of the barrel, and try to take that knurling down a little bit more, and see if I can wear it out. I really don't want to try to bore out this because this has been salt bath nitrided or nitrocarburized, whatever they call that process, basically. Which is a really good corrosion preventative process. I don't want to take that surface layer off the operating rod guide. Okay, so what I've done here is I decided that for me to get this portion of the barrel down to about 0.7995 or somewhere around there was I went ahead and I got this operating rod guide and I worked it back and forth. And when it was really hard to turn, I just used a crescent wrench, okay? And I would just use the crescent wrench to work it back and forth. And then once it got so loose that I could just spin this freely by hand, I got some 280 grit lapping compound that I got out of a Cocopelli scope lapping kit, and I applied it to the portion of the barrel where the operating rod guide goes. So now I'm just working this operating rod guide back and forth, spinning it all around, and what that's doing is it's evenly grinding around the barrel so that I don't have any high spots or flat spots. It's going to be just under 0.800 inches all the way around. Okay, I could have used a hand file, or I could have used some emery cloth and just kind of worked it back and forth like I was doing with the sandpaper, but I kind of didn't really trust myself to not get more of a egg-shaped or some kind of a funky uneven surface. So I went ahead and I went with just the old operating rod guide, and since it's not going to be used anymore, why not? So you're thinking, okay, well, what happens when it gets so loose? Well, guess what? So I just take it off, and then I move it over here. I just move it right here to my vise, and I'm just going to put that in here, okay, and I'm going to just squeeze it just a little bit, okay, and then just enough to oblong it to make it kind of an oval shaped, and that should tighten it back up. So now I'm going to slide it back over here, put some more lapping compound on there, and just keep working it back and forth. Okay. Then you want to take it off, clean off your lapping compound. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and measure this, and I'm roughly somewhere around 0.0801. Okay, so I just need just a little bit more to go, and you can also trial fit the new guide. And wouldn't you know it, it's actually just the way I think I want it to be. Yeah, so this is how I want it. I want to be able to slide it on to the barrel, but to also be able to be really, really tight, but to also be able to get a wrench and position this the right way when the time comes. So this is good to go. Okay, so we're back, and I've cleaned up the knurling quite a bit, and I thought I was going to have to hammer it on, but as I was trial fitting it, I realized that actually now I can slide this on by hand. So the key that you're looking for here when you slide this operating rod guide on is that it's snug, it's not loose, you still may be, but you still want to be able to move it around, and I think this is just about perfect. Now before, in a traditional stock, we had a condition where the only thing keeping the operating rod in line with the barrel and the gas cylinder aligned was the operating rod guide, and it was permanently anchored to the barrel. Now in this situation, now we have three different points. We have the bottom mounting point, the operating rod hole, and the barrel hole. Okay, so now that this is solidly anchored to the stock, you don't need that super tight fitting where the operating rod guide wouldn't move. Now by default, because we have a chassis system that is going to anchor the operating rod guide in here and keep it centered horizontal or vertically, we don't need that condition anymore where this is so tight that you can't move it. Now it just has to not wiggle or not have any play in it. And these are now the alignment points, these vertical alignment points, as well as the receiver leg alignment points as well. So these are the keys to alignment. So you want to be able to move this operating rod guide so that it can center itself in here. But you want to have to be able to crank on it manually to get that ideal spot. You don't want it flopping around loose, because then that kind of it cancels out the whole point of the operating rod guide.